CBS didn't think Americans would accept the fact that Lucy would marry a foreign man. I Love Lucy started out as a radio show called My Favorite Husband, starring Lucille Ball. Lucille said yes as long as her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, would be cast as her husband. On the radio show, Richard Denning played Lucy's husband. The network didn't like the idea. Liz Cooper was Lucy's name on the radio show, and they didn't think Americans would believe that Liz would be married to a foreign man with a very noticeable accent. Even though Lucy and Desi were married in real life, the network didn't go for it at first. Finally, to have Lucy on TV, CBS gave in, but it wasn't easy to convince them. It's a good thing they did because Desi helped make the show what it was. To convince the network, Lucy and Desi took their show on the road. Desi had a successful career touring the country with his Rumba band. To keep him home with her, Lucy wanted the network to cast Desi as her husband. The couple wanted to prove to the network that they were a great comedy team, so they created a vaudevillian skit that was inserted in the middle of performances by the Desi Arnaz Orchestra. They toured during the summer of 1950, and people loved watching Lucille's antics. They also loved her interaction with Desi. They had a skit called The Professor, and it convinced the network to cast Desi. The writers loved the skit so much it was incorporated into Season 1, Episode 6 of the show. Lucy and Desi refused to move to New York. Lucy and Desi wanted to work in Los Angeles so they could be at home near their baby daughter, Lucy. In 1951, most TV shows were broadcast from New York because it's where the sponsor, Philip Morris, wanted the show to originate. Back then, the United States wasn't wired for TV from coast to coast. The show would broadcast live and could only be transmitted so far. The show would be preserved on a camera aimed at a TV monitor and was shipped to distant stations. Philip Morris didn't want to do this because their biggest cigarette market was up and down the East Coast. They wanted the picture quality to be best in this area, so filming in Los Angeles wouldn't work. Desi suggested that the show be filmed with 3 cameras like a stage play. This would provide the same picture quality in all markets. At this point, multi-cameras hadn't been used on sitcoms. Desi hired legendary cinematographer Carl Freund to solve the problem. They built the right set to film this way, but CBS said it cost too much money. Lucy and Desi agreed to take a cut in their salary, and their production company, Desilu Productions, would retain ownership of the films. The 35mm film was part of the reason for the show's success. Since Lucy and Desi owned the series, they were the first millionaire TV stars. Only Lucy could make fun of Desi's broken English. After the first few episodes, there was an unwritten rule that only Lucy could make fun of Desi's broken English. The writers allowed other characters to make remarks, but each time the studio audience sat in silence. The audience thought it was cruel for anyone to make fun of Desi's accent other than Lucy. Smoking was required on camera. I Love Lucy almost didn't make it on TV because CBS had a hard time finding a sponsor for the show. When the tobacco giant Philip Morris signed on at the last minute, the show was allowed to go on. Philip Morris had one condition. The characters had to smoke a lot, and the name Philip Morris had to be worked into the dialogue as much as possible. The only problem with this was that Lucy smoked Chesterfield cigarettes. To get around it, Lucy had stagehands stuff the Philip Morris cigarette packs with her brand. William Frawley wasn't the first choice to play Fred Mertz. Lucille Ball wanted Gale Gordon, the man who played Fred on her radio show, to play him on the show. At the time, Gale had a role in the Our Miss Brooks radio show. He wanted more money than Desilu had to offer, so they had to find someone else. William Frawley knew Lucy in passing, and he asked to read for the part. Because William had a reputation of being a heavy drinker, CBS and Philip Morris weren't sure about casting him. Desi, who was also a drinker, was sure that William was cranky enough to bring Fred to life. He was offered the role on the condition that if he missed work for any reason other than a legitimate illness, he would be written out of the show. William never missed a day of filming. Several actresses were considered to play Ethel. Lucille had worked with Bea Benaderet on the radio and wanted her to play Ethel. Unfortunately, Bea had just signed on to another project, so she wasn't available. Lucy had worked with Barbara Pepper in the past, and they were friends, so she was considered for the role. The network shot this down because she was a heavy drinker. They thought having 2 heavy drinkers on the show was too risky. Barbara played background characters on several episodes of the show and went on to star on Green Acres. The director, Mark Daniels, saw Vivian Vance at the La Jolla Playhouse, and he recommended her to Desi. Desi liked her, and she was cast as Ethel. The Mertzes hated each other off camera. Vivian Vance was 22 years younger than her TV husband. She resented having an old poop play her husband. William reacted by calling Vivian a sack of doorknobs and a bitch. The hatred they felt for one another was only known to the directors and writers, and it never showed on screen. The two didn't want to jeopardize their roles on the show, so they didn't show their hostility toward one another. Some of the actors didn't even know they hated each other. Desi Arnaz had lifts in his shoes and his love seat. Desi claimed to be 5 feet 11 inches tall, but he was really 5 feet 9 inches. Lucille Ball was 5 feet 7 inches tall barefoot, so she towered over her husband when she wore heels. Desi was a prideful man and didn't want his wife to be taller than him. On the love seat, production added an extra pillow that couldn't be seen by the audience. This made him look taller than Lucille when they sat together. He also put lifts in his shoes for scenes when the couple stood together. Desi rejected a scene that involved Ricky cheating on his taxes. Desi believed in the American dream, and he was very patriotic. When he was just 17 years old, Fulgencio Batista, the woman in the scene, was a real-life dipper who worked at See's Candies on Santa Monica Boulevard named Amanda Milligan. Amanda had never seen the show, but she was hired anyway. Amanda didn't want to slap Lucy as the scene called for, and the directors were worried. When it came time to shoot the scene, Amanda slapped Lucy so hard it caused her ears to ring. When the show wrapped, Lucy asked Amanda how she liked show business. Amanda said she'd never been so bored in her life. She preferred making candy. Lucille Ball was too stressed to appreciate the humor in one of the best episodes. One of the best episodes in the show's history was Lucy Does a TV Commercial. During filming, Lucy was too worried about messing up her lines to appreciate the humor in the show. She was worried that she couldn't say, Vita Meat a Vegemite. To make things easier, she had Maury Thompson, the script supervisor, stand off camera with cue cards that had her lines. It made things less stressful for Lucy, but she still couldn't enjoy herself. They didn't like to yell cut and reshoot scenes. Because the show was filmed in front of a studio audience, the occasional blooper was ignored. An example of this took place in redecorating the Mertz's apartment. In the scene, Lucy was talking about how the Mertzes needed help fixing their marriage and their apartment. Desi says, paint the furniture and reupholster the old furniture, which wasn't right. The show didn't stop, and the blooper was left in the show. Lucille's pregnancy created panic behind the scenes. During season 2, Lucille found out she was pregnant. Lucy had suffered 3 miscarriages before this, and the couple was thrilled to find out they were expecting. The producers and the couple were concerned about the fate of the show. Other than the 40s sitcom Mary and Johnny, which also starred a real-life married couple, a woman had never been visibly pregnant in a TV series. Because Lucy got so big while pregnant, they couldn't hide it. The network eventually agreed to add the pregnancy into the storyline. While filming, the network had a Catholic priest and a rabbi on set to make sure they didn't do anything questionable. CBS believed that the word pregnant was too vulgar for TV, so they replaced it with expecting. Little Ricky and Desi Arnaz Jr. were born on the same day. Lucy and Desi knew that Lucy would have a C-section. Lucy's doctor scheduled all C-sections on Mondays, which was the same night of the pregnancy episodes. When Lucy went to the hospital, Lucy Ricardo did too. Lucille suffered during the grape stomping episode. The woman Lucy was supposed to fight with in the grape vat barely spoke English. She didn't understand what the producers wanted, and she held Lucy's head under the liquid in the vat, and Lucy almost drowned. Lucille drove guest star Harpo Marx crazy. Lucille was a fan of Harpo Marx, and she wasn't prepared for his style of acting. Lucy insisted on a lot of rehearsals, and Harpo didn't work that way. He said he had been in show business for 35 years, so he didn't have to rehearse. There were a few times where scenes had to be reshot after the audience left and then pieced together by the editor. The longest laugh. During the episode where Lucy hid a dozen eggs in her pocket and danced the tango with Ricky, the eggs broke. The audience laughed for 65 seconds straight. Desi Arnaz wanted realism. There were many times when Desi insisted on realism. For example, in the episode Pioneer Woman, they needed an